Greetings, ghouls. I'm your host, Spooky Creepy J, and tonight we're taking a look at the first episode of the 6th season of a fabulous little show called Tales from the Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt.
The show is on HBO for 12 seasons and is based on the gruesome EC comics of the 1950s. What always stuck out to me about this series is how deep it could dive into controversial topics, only by masking itself in the horror genre. For example, the show we will discuss this evening explores the legitimacy of the judicial system in the United States, which is something a lot of people have been thinking about lately. Though the show presents a gnarly version of the legal system, I think we can still see a semblance of truth here. So without further ado, let's jump right in. We meet our protagonist, attorney Geraldine Ferret, as she is escorted into the courthouse in handcuffs. The place, Sticksville, New York, a small town that we will soon learn is extraordinarily strict. She makes a quick call to some dude named Joey. She tells him she's stuck in some small town upstate. Geraldine ends the call after making plans to meet with Joey later and heads straight over to solicit her legal services to a very injured man. He doesn't seem eager to talk to Geraldine and soon scurries off. Geraldine sits down next to a man and she soon finds out that he's there for felonious auto sales. The man admits to rolling back the odometer on a car he sold someone. Geraldine tells him he ought to get 10 years behind bars, and he admits that sounds lovely. But he expects something much, much worse. The man gets called into courtroom A on the loudspeaker. Geraldine offers him a tissue as he snivels uncontrollably. She looks at a picture on the wall of a public execution with the date scratched out. The strange thing about the portrait is the modern car in the frame, which she quickly notices and becomes frightened, just as a hand reaches out and touches her. It happens to be her public defender, who she immediately belittles due to his wacky getup. Geraldine is called to courtroom A, where we walk in to see her car-dealing pal taken away sobbing. She approaches the judge as her public defender rushes in behind her. The public defender tells her that he's talked to the judge and they've come to a very fair agreement, seeing as we caught the judge on a good day. The charge will be reduced to being a public nuisance. Geraldine says fine and takes out her checkbook out of her purse.
Okay, fine. What's it gonna cost me?
10.
All this bullshit for $10? Here, keep the change.
Not $10, Miss Ferret. 10 lashes. They can flail you now and you can be on your way.
Geraldine questions the sanity of the public defender, just as the judge lets them know the offer is only on the table for another 5 seconds. Geraldine decides to plead not guilty. The plaintiff or prosecutor presents their case and her license plate is only 5 digits instead of 6. She explains that the space between counts as a character. The public defender rushes back with exculpatory evidence and presents it to the judge. It's a manila folder filled with newspaper and magazine clippings of the buzz created by Geraldine's most prominent case, where she sued a pacemaker company, eventually bankrupting them. The pacemaker was totally safe, but she won the case anyway, getting her client over $50 million in a settlement. The judge thinks she's full of shit and deems her guilty as charged. The judge orders her a fine of 100 lashes, administered immediately, and the guards rush in to drag her off to the dungeon. Geraldine runs into her pal, who is crying in the hallway.
Oh, what are you crying about?
They cut off my nose.
The whipping noises intensify as she nears the door, just as the public defender comes in to tell her license plate was cleared and she's alright after all. Just as she's about to walk out the door, a man shows Geraldine the business card she gave to the very injured man in the beginning of the show. This is illegal. The man already retained counsel. So Geraldine is escorted back to, this time, courtroom B. The judge walks in. The public defender has a strategy and he decides to plead not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. Geraldine can't believe it. The judge laughs aloud at them and finds her guilty and sentences her to 1 year of the pillory. Uncomfortable as ever, she soon starts to hallucinate, seeing a man who spent his life savings on surgery after surgery because he couldn't get a pacemaker, and a lady who claims she died because she couldn't afford a doctor because of how expensive his malpractice insurance is. Her public defender shows up to break up the hallucinations, to tell her that they granted her appeal if she still wants to try it. So Geraldine goes to courtroom C, the last and final courtroom. She says, "Oh, hell no," and tries to leave, but the door closes behind her. The judge thinks that her sentence was too light and decides that she's more deserving of death by electrocution. She's terrified, but her no-good public defender decides to approach the bench, and he whispers back and forth with the judge. After hearing out the public defender, the judge decides that Geraldine is better off serving the public. He sentences her to return home to do public service for an unspecified period of time. Geraldine, thinking that she's finally good to go, rushes out the door when she realizes it isn't the hallway, but a room with an electric chair. The ghouls from before are back to haunt her some more. Confused, she gets pushed aside from the chair as the public defendant straps himself into it. He tells her, "You are home now, counselor, because I'd rather be dead than you." The hallucination flips the switch to the chair and he goes up in sparks. Geraldine can't believe it when she looks down and sees that she's now wearing the hideous public defendant outfit as the loud speaker calls her to courtroom A.